All right, so 7:33, and a few people have logged on, and other people are logging on. And welcome everybody who's there. Thank you for being in time, and thank you for spending time on a Saturday evening with us. Welcome, Niranjana.
Thank you.
So, briefly, everyone, what we wanted to do today, we know that it's application season, and for grade 12 students, there's so much on your plate right now. It's not just that the application essays are now becoming a real thing that you need to deal with every day, but you have your half yearlies coming. Some of you are doing another shot at the SAT or ECT in October. So I know there's a lot on your plate, and those of you who are working furiously at it, we wanted to do this webinar just to give you some tips, to give you some support, and to let you know that there is support as you need to. So here's a little introduction about who we are and what we're doing here. And then the way this webinar will really run is that we've got just a few slides and a little bit of an overview that Niranjana and myself will take you through. That would be about 25 minutes to half an hour. Post that, we can address your specific questions. So all of you will find on your left, there's a indicator that you can ask questions. If you want to ask, speak up also. Kritika, who's a co-organizer, can allow you to talk, and then you can speak up, or you can type in your question and we can answer your question specifically. Okay. So first, briefly, quickly, a lot of you know Inomi. We're a career and college guidance firm. As our name indicates, we are all about self-discovery. The name is I Know Me, which is I know myself. And that's really what we're about. And we work with students across US, Canada, Hong Kong, UK, Singapore, India, helping them both build career paths which are exciting and help them lead to success, as well as help them with college applications across all these countries. So part of what we'll be doing today, a lot of what we'll be doing today, we'll be focusing on the US kind of a story kind of essay, but we'll also contrast it with the statement of purpose and what that means for various universities in Canada, UK, etc., where they're looking for a statement of purpose, which is a slightly different angle. So that's who we are as an organization. About myself, a lot of you already know who I am. I'm Richa Saklani. I run I Know Me. I've written a book called The Ultimate Guide to 21st Century Careers. And Niranjana and I are both from IIM Ahmedabad, and that's really wonderful coincidence. Niranjana, if you can just tell us 2 minutes quickly about yourself, and then we start.
Sure. So hi, everyone. So my name is Niranjana, and I graduated from IMA, and then I worked in banking for a couple of years before I decided what I really wanted to do was to write and to help others write. So I did a degree in creative writing from the United States, and now I live in California, and I work as a writer, and I also work as a writing consultant. So I work with different types of people, but a large part of my work is with students who want to get some help with their college essays. And I've been doing writing related work for over 15 years now. Most of my students are in the United States, but I do have a lot of international students and many from India. So while I haven't lived in India for a while, I am quite familiar with the latest trends in Indian schools and how much pressure there is, and how hard it is to write an essay. And that is common whether you live in India or the United States or anywhere else. So I'm glad to be here and glad to help you. And if you have any questions about the essay, we both are here to answer that.
Okay, great. Wonderful, Niranjana. It's really very fortunate that we have you with us and that students can access your expertise. And let's plunge straight into the subject that we are talking about, which is college application essays. So the first thing, Niranjana, I want to ask you a question which I've known a number of my students to ask me. They find it a little frustrating that colleges want essays in the first place. They're like, I'm working so hard on my grades and I'm doing so well and I'm, a great student. Why isn't that enough? Why isn't my school grades and SAT scores enough? What is this whole thing about my story and about all these, a lot of essays that US colleges are looking for? So do you have an answer to that?
Yes, I do. So the US application is, the US colleges are quite different than the regular kind of applications you might be used to, because what they're looking on and very focused on is how you fit in with their culture. So the US university typically has quite a unique culture, and each university within that is quite different. So what the essay does is to tell the university something about you as a person. And so then they can read that and kind of gauge whether you'd be a good fit for their institution, their values, and their beliefs. So the role of the essay is also to give context to who you are. And so the US application admissions officers believe that numbers don't tell the whole story, because you might have had a lot of help getting a great SAT score. What about your school? Maybe you had a tutor or something to help you get those great grades. So what the essay does is to actually give a bigger picture of you as a student, who you are, what you're all about. And they really want to see that while deciding whether to admit you or not, to see whether you'll actually fit in.
Right. So is there something particular that all the colleges are looking for? So, often when students get down to write, they're a little confused about, do I just have to write a great story? Do I have to show my writing skills? What really are colleges looking for? Is it common across colleges, or is it specific to different colleges?
Well, what is common across all colleges is that they want a feel of you beyond the numbers. So your SAT or ACT scores and your grade points say something about you, but they really want to know who you are as a person. And that is common across any college you apply to. So the purpose of the college essay is to reveal who you are. So, and we can kind of break that down into your personality, values, and character. So different universities are looking for different things, maybe in terms of emphasis. For example, you have a university like Stanford is really fond of people who want to take big risks and want to become the next millionaire by the time they're 25. They kind of value that edgy, risk-taking character. But you could say that the universities of California are more focused on people who have maybe a slightly activist bent to them. They want to change the world, not by making their millions really fast, but through social justice or something. So different universities do look for different things, but what they're all looking for is the sense of what you are about and how that fits in with what the university is about.
Okay. So Niranjana, your slide says capture attention from the very first sentence. And I found students struggling with that a lot, just struggling to start, staring at the first opening, staring at a blank page and trying to figure out, so what should I say? How do I start? How important it is to agonize over the starting, and what would be some good ways to start an essay?
Yeah, so first I'd say don't agonize. All writers agonize over the first sentence, but the first sentence is really overrated. Start at the middle. That is always the advice I give. Like, don't think of, how can I best attract attention with my opening sentence when you're starting to write the essay. That is something you do a little bit later. So start always right in the middle of the piece. Do not start by saying, I get a lot of students who write something like, let me begin by saying why I think it's a great idea to do computer science. You never want to start with something like that. That's kind of boring and it's kind of unnecessary in the essay. They know that you're trying to say something. So instead, if you're going to write about an incident, start with the most vital part of the incident. Like maybe you were, traveling somewhere and, some kind of mishap happened. So start with saying, I had been in the airport for 36 hours or something. You really want a strong opening sentence. So at this slide, I've actually put some opening sentences for essays at Stanford that worked. These are all successful essays. And so if you just take a look at the first sentence here, like the sample opening line, I change my name each time I place an order at Starbucks. That is the opening line. And what the opening line should do is to have the admissions officer saying, that's weird, I want to know more about this. Or that's interesting. Oh, how did this happen? What does that mean? So why does the student change his or her name each time they're going to Starbucks? And the second example, for example, I have old hands. Like, why do you have old hands? Like, you're 17 years old. You should be having, teenage hands, right? So when you have an intriguing sentence like this, it makes them want to read more. And really, what I tell all my students is, the poor admissions officer is reading 50 essays a day, like 6 days a week. So you really want to help them and not bore them. And it is your duty almost as an essay writer to write something interesting and to keep the attention of the admissions officer. So if we could just look at the third sentence on this slide. So you can see this sentence, I was paralyzed from the waist down sentence. Like many of us would actually give context before we actually jumped into this as the opening sentence. You'd be like, maybe I was traveling on this road and then this truck came out of nowhere and hit me, and then I'll open my eyes and try to figure out what was happening, and then I realized I'd been in an accident, and then you would write this paragraph as your second or third paragraph. But in a college essay, you really want to skip the introduction and just go straight to what's interesting and vital, and then you can lead on from the opening paragraph into giving an explanation of how this happened. But you must start with a really strong opening sentence, and I cannot stress this strongly enough, because boredom is a sure killer for your application.
How about quotes? There's an echo. I don't know why that is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I discourage students from starting with a quote. I find that students often start with a quote. Would you agree that starting with a quote is like wasting a lot of words out of those 650 words?
Absolutely. Unless the quote has some true personal meaning for you, right? It's something your grandmother said and it's like a kind of unusual sentence, and you've been kind of using that as your personal go-to sentence since you were in kindergarten or something. Quoting someone like, say, Einstein or Elon Musk is not helping your application. You are saying something about someone else when you could be talking about yourself in the limited word count that you have. So I wouldn't say it's a blanket no for quotes, but make sure it's truly personal. Don't put the quote to show that you're A, aware of the quote, or B, that you admire that person, because that is really taking away from the emphasis on you. And the essay is really all about your character, your values. So the quote, even if it's a magnificent quote and beautifully worded, is not helping you. It's helping the person who said that quote.
So Niranjana, let me take you up from what you said about the essay being about your values and who you are. So if you look at these opening statements, they're very interesting. At the same time, I find sometimes the students get lost in telling the story, because once they are into the middle of a story and something dramatic happens, then they start building the details of that story. So how should the story be used to reflect on yourself? How would, for example, any of these statements build into reflecting on yourself? What should be the meat of the essay, really?
The meat of the essay is really self-reflection. So when you're building the story, you need a hook. And the hook can actually be anything. But what you really want the essay to be about is some kind of personal realization about yourself, how you see the world, and how things have changed for you. So, in any story, whether it's a book or a movie, you always start at one point and you end at the other point. So if we could just see the next slide, maybe, how to build the essay. The whole point of the essay is, actually, I guess the slide after this would be more suitable. Yeah. So when you're building the essay, what you need is an opening, but the body of the essay demonstrates self-reflection. You can say something like, when you started out, you were really shy and, you never participated in class discussions because you were always afraid of what would people think of you. And then this incident happened, and it can be any kind of incident. And the conclusion is that you kind of moved along, and now the person you are is not so shy. You still are shy, but you kind of overcome it and you understand the need to overcome that. So the body of the essay is really about showing your process of self-reflection. And ideally, there's a word that got truncated after ideally in this slide, but it's growth, right? You want to show that you kind of grew as a human being. You started at point X, and then you thought about what you are, what you do, who you are, and you moved to point Y by the end of the essay. So the details, the specific details are not important, but what they do is to build a good sense of atmosphere. So you want to choose like really interesting details that demonstrate the situation vividly. So let's go with, suppose you're playing at a very important music performance, for example. So you could be like, I was standing on the stage and holding my violin and playing blah, blah, blah. And the concert hall was really hot. Or you could say something really dramatic like sweat beaded on my forehead and dripped off my nose and fell onto the violin string. So that kind of detail is really useful and it's important in conveying a sense of your emotions. But the kind of mechanical details, it was in October 2018 that I first realized that is not a detail that is relevant. Every detail should really build up the story in terms of atmosphere, emotion, and learning. So that's the thing to keep in mind.
Right, Niranjana. So, since you were saying that it should sort of reflect on yourself, now how profound should this reflection be? Because I often find that what the stories I find most powerful are the stories that are about simple learnings that perhaps all of us may have had during our teenage years, but it's how powerfully it's put across. However, I find that students feel uncomfortable if they feel that their essay is too simple. Something like I got over stage fright, for example, and I started enjoying the flow of the whole thing. So I just want your inputs on this, that, is it all right if the student is building a story that is relatively simple about themselves, or does it need to be very deep and complex?
No, simplicity is great and it is a winning strategy. So at 17, no one expects you to change the world or, have evolved into some kind of super wise sage. The experiences you've had till 17 are usually relatively limited because you're in school and under the guidance of parents. And so the realizations you have stem from the experiences you've had. And simple is really good. The thing I always say is like, it's not the topic that is important, but the approach. And, maybe we could go back to the previous slide for that. So, there's a limited number of things you can talk about when you're 17 years old and in school, like you haven't had a wide range of experiences. So no one expects you to have a sweeping conclusion about big topics like politics or religion or, what makes a good human being. That's not at all what we're looking for. It's just something very personal to you, which gave you a moment saying, aha, I'm this kind of person, and maybe I need to do this to become a better kind of person. Or, hey, I've learned something from this experience and I realized that I thought I knew everything, but now I don't. Or I have this quality and it's not a great quality and I like to improve myself, and this is how I'm going to go about it. And that's all they're looking for. So, no magnificent sweeping essays are required at all. The key word here is to be very, very personal.
Niranjana, I find kids often agonizing over this whole thing about topic choice, particularly because some of their most powerful experiences have been on the sports field. Now they say, oh, sports is such a common thing. So many people will be writing about a sports essay. Or often I find that students want to talk about a personal thing that their family may have gone through, like the separation of parents or a divorce. And then again, there's this whole thing, oh, but so many people are writing about it. So I wanted your inputs on this. Do you think that a topic can be too common for a child to pick up? Should they avoid topics like, divorce or sports or art or stuff that appears to be common?
There is no real topic to be avoided other than the ones which are don'ts on the screen. But what is really important is that your approach is truly unique. So yes, sports is a very common topic, but most people have the same story about sports, and that is the problem. It's not that the topic is common, but that the approach is common, which is, I went on the sports field and then I had some kind of failure, or like, I broke a leg or something, and then I struggled and then I had to overcome these odds, and then, I won in the race at the end, and that taught me the power of hard work or something. That is a really cliched kind of essay. But, if sports teaches you something else, like, at the end of it, maybe you're not cut out for sports. You could have a sports essay would say, I love being fit, but I realize competitive sports is not my thing. Then absolutely go for it, because it shows self-reflection. You've understood something about about your character. And similarly for your, like if parents went through divorce or something like that, it is a very common topic. So it can't be like, I felt this, but it has to be something like, due to this experience, this is what I learned about myself. These are my values. I understood, something about my parents and something about myself. So it's always got to be original when it comes to self-reflection. That said, the standard kind of, I have, parents who are going through this, and that makes me kind of anxious, and I have, I'm worried, is not okay.
So, one of our attendees is asking this question. They say, you've listed mental health as a don't, and that I understand because a lot of students go through depression or anxiety. Teenagers are like that, and there's so much pressure on them. And they want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it because they got over it, and, they've experienced that victory over a really, really difficult situation. But that is a don't, and I do want you to both explain why mental health is a don't, but also answer the specific question that someone's asking here, which is that how about talking about a learning disability like dyslexia? Is that great? So two questions. One, why is mental health a don't? Two, how about learning disability?
Sure. So mental health is a don't for two reasons. One is that, if you have anxiety with what's going on right now, and I understand it's a really big deal, right? Like you have exams, you have this, college stuff going on, you have stuff going on at home. If you have mental health now, college is even tougher than school in many ways. You have a support system here, people, and the school workload is not actually as high as college. So when an AdCom person reads an essay about mental health, they're like, they feel for you, they truly do, but they're also saying like, hey, you can't cope in 11th and 12th. What are the chances that you will cope in college? Not comparatively higher, in fact, anything lower. So that is one reason. The second reason I say don't talk about mental health is that colleges in the US are really worried about liability when it comes to things like harm and self-harm. So there are students, unfortunately, with severe mental health issues who have, harmed their fellow students or, tried to commit self-harm. And that is a huge legal nightmare for a college. And of course, PR nightmare. And they're good people. They don't want to have someone in their campus do something terrible. So they would rather avoid that. So mental health is a straight no, like just don't do it. With dyslexia, it's hard to say. It depends. Most colleges have accommodations if you have a learning disability. In the US, they will kind of go out of their way to help you. The thing is to see how it's going to affect your participation on campus, and if you're still going to be able to participate without the onus being on the university to take care of you. So you can write about learning, realizing that you have a learning disability and how you overcame it, but think of the applications for the college to, in case they do admit you. Will they have to make special accommodations for you or set you up with a special counselor or tutor? So those would obviously reduce your chances of admission compared to someone else who was similar in profile but didn't have this issue.
Right. So I have another interesting question here, which is someone's asking, is it necessary to pick one topic and write an essay based solely on that? Or is it okay to choose 2, 3 topics and merge them together in an essay? How would that work? What do you think, Niranjana?
So there has to be a single point of focus. So you could use different experiences and anecdotes which all converge towards a certain point. But you have 650 words, so do not spread yourself very thin. So if you want to say 3 things about yourself in the essay which are wildly different, that's going to be very hard to do in 650 words. So you can have, suppose that the topic you want to emphasize in your essay is that you're compassionate. Then you can have like different experiences. Maybe you worked with underprivileged kids. Maybe you worked as a tutor at school. Maybe you volunteer every summer, at some kind of old age home. All those different experiences go in to build this picture of you as compassionate. But suppose you want to say that you're a compassionate risk taker who's very imaginative. You cannot cover so much in 650 words. So focus your essay on what you really think you want the university to know about you, and do not address multiple topics and characteristics in the common app. And you also have the supplements. If you're really keen to say a lot, the space for that is the supplements.
Yeah, and I think, you really have to be a very cool type of genius to be able to string together many things, and you make it really powerful in 650 words. So I have read some really interesting essays. One I remember is called The Punk Rock Philosopher, where he's talking about specific things that he's seen in different things, different one thing at a party, one thing in a sports field, and something else, and then sort of reflecting on it. But he's so cool and humorous and tongue in cheek. And it's taking a risk. I think it's taking a huge risk, and sometimes it can really work. But I'll agree with you that it sounds like something that can best. It's best, I guess, to focus on one or at max two things, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I was hoping we have a slide on finishing the essay, but since we don't, let me ask you that question that students do struggle sometimes with. That okay, so I've told you the story, and the story is very interesting. Now, how do I take it towards in conclusion? Should I conclude towards saying that that's why I want to study computer science, or that's why I want to study sociology and I want to get into social work? Do I connect it to the subject that I'm studying in, or to my vision, or how do I conclude this essay?
Yeah, so there's no, like one size fits all approach to that. The important thing about the conclusion I want to say is please don't write a summary of the essay in your last line, which is something a lot of students do. Therefore, since I am X, Y, and Z, I would like to do this. That is not the way to go about it. So there are two things. If your essay lends itself to kind of the subject you've chosen, then by all means go for it. So for example, if you are a person who wants to do something on the medical track and the essay is about how your grandfather's Alzheimer's, inspired you to go to med school, then, more power to you. You can make this beautiful conclusion saying that this experience has led me wanting to study medicine, and that's what I'm going to do. But if it's a story just demonstrates self-reflection, like you said, you had stage fright and now you don't have it anymore, you can't make an overt connection with your major. But what you can say is, college is a place of new experiences, and I'm going to go there and be scared, but it's okay because I now have the tools to cope with stage fright. So you can link it up in a sense of what you'll do in the future, but it will not be specific to a college or major, and both are fine. The whole body of the essay will guide the conclusion, and the other thing to remember in the conclusion is that it should link up with the opening in some way. There should be some kind of logical flow to why you chose that amazing first sentence as your punchy opening, and so there should be a kind of arc to the story where there's an opening which logically flows into the body, which flows into the conclusion, and the conclusion and opening must have some kind of connection which shows the reader why you chose that opening.
Right. So, Niranjana, if I can now ask you to reflect a little bit on some of the specific prompts that the Common App and the UC app have presented to students. And I believe this year both the UC app and the Common App have the same prompts as before. And there are some particular ones that students struggle a lot with. So let's look at the one about one of the UC app prompts, which is about communities. Now, I find a lot of our students are struggle with this idea of community. That, of course, it's very easy to talk about your ethnic community, that we are Bengali or we Gujarati or, whatever it is. Is that too cliched? What other type of community can they speak about?
Yeah, so these kind of questions are actually wide open. You can choose any kind of community. So community is basically a place where you feel happy, where you feel that you belong, where you feel that you're at home. So the point of this is to reflect on why you feel happy and at home and with those particular set of people, right? So your community can be anything. Like, for example, if you're a reader, your community could be, going to the library and just hanging out with people reading by themselves. And, the focus is always what it says about you as a person. Ethnic community, you can, but what does it say about you that you rely on your ethnic community? That is, something you'll really have to think about, because that's a given. Like the most basic community you have is like your family and your ethnic community. So the other thing about an ethnic community is that when you go to the US, you will not have that community anymore. So if you've been relying on an ethnic community to build bridges, you might want to think about it, because are you going to rely on just hanging out with Indian students once you go to the US? Maybe you don't want to present that. But community is really a place where you're happy, and there is no guideline. Like if you're into a certain sport, that sports cohort would be your community. If you're into doing Lego robotics, that could be your community. If you stay in, one of these big apartment blocks, like the kids of that block could be your community. And really, it's wide open. There's no stricture to it.
Right. So, one of the essay prompts is share an essay on any of your choice. Now, sometimes, students think that, oh, this is a very convenient thing to do because, the other prompts ask specific questions and then sub questions, and they're not sure whether the story that they want to tell fits into this prompt or that prompt. Oh, let me just go with the one that says that, choose any topic of your choice. How does that reflect on them?
The prompts are actually intentionally designed to be really wide. Something I often do with students is really get down to what they want to say about themselves and then figure out which prompt will fit it the best. So the prompt itself, there is no preference given to one answering one prompt over the other. So you can totally choose a general prompt if you truly think you have something to say that doesn't fit into the others. That is not key in the process, and no university is going to uh, rate you higher or lower because you chose a certain prompt. It's totally fine.
So it's fine to go with the one that says that, choose any topic of your choice.
Yes.
Okay. And in the UC apps, the eighth prompt reads that, what else would you like to share about yourself that truly makes you stand out? How about that one?
Yeah, so a lot of times the essay is about giving context to something in the rest of the application. So, for example, you had great grades till 10th, and then they dipped in 11th grade, and then they went back up. They might be like, hey, there's been this dip. Why is that happening? So, maybe some personal circumstances changed for you. There was an illness, or your parent was let go, or something like that. So one of those that kind of open-ended prompt, if you haven't already described it, is a good place to give context to unusual patterns in your application. So that's basically where you would write stuff like that within the application.
Yeah, but I also feel that perhaps in that prompt which says that, what truly makes you stand out, it needs to be something concrete. If someone just says, oh, I would like to share that I'm very imaginative or that I'm really hardworking without having anything really outstanding to talk about it, just sort of, these are my interests. So that may not be the best way to use that prompt. Tell me if you agree with that.
Absolutely. That prompt is really specific, and it's really truly to get context. So you want to explain why something happened. So do not kind of waste that opportunity by being very generic in the answer. So if you just want to describe your qualities, the other 7 prompts are really for that. Right. So if you have something like, the prompt which says the most significant challenge you faced and how you overcame it. So if you want to say my qualities are like I'm hardworking and determined, that is the place to do that. So the last question is really for exceptional circumstances, like you had an illness or, something, you moved 3 schools in 1 year because of circumstances beyond your control. That is the place to put it in.
I had a student who went through that exact experience of moving through 3 schools in 1 year, and believe me, that makes a fantastic story. Yeah. So, now I want to shift gears a little bit because one of our students was asking about a statement of purpose, which is frankly a slightly different animal from this personal story type of essay that a US university, or in India, Ashoka University would be looking at. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about what would the focus of a statement of purpose be and how that's different. So see, a statement of purpose is, okay, if a personal essay or a personal story type of essay is answering the question, who are you? The statement of purpose is answering the question, why do you want to study this subject in this college? So it's asking a different question, and it's a lot more specific to this course. It's a lot more goal-oriented, the statement of purpose. So that needs to therefore be a lot more concrete about your engagement with the particular subject that you're applying for. So what it requires you to share is, one is enthusiasm and motivation for the study of the subject. So I often find people writing statements of purpose very similar to a story type of essay, saying things like, oh, ever since I was 6 years old, I was interested in this thing. I find And they use the word interesting or interested a lot. Oh, I'm very interested in electronics engineering. Then I did this internship in electronics engineering, and I found that very interesting, without you really giving any specifics about why you found it interesting. Now that makes an admissions officer think that you may not really know much about the subject, and therefore perhaps you're not really suited to apply for it. That you maybe someone told you that economics is a great subject, that's why you're applying for it. Do you really know anything about economics? So it helps to say something like, when I studied about the Industrial Revolution and how that has impacted the world today, or how that has impacted the world of work today, and how it has impacted social relations, I got very interested in studying economic history. Or if you say something like, if I look at the development of India and China, and I see that they are both highly populated countries, and I'm curious to understand why the GDP growth rates are different, and how politics has impacted the economic growth in these two countries. Now that shows me that you really sort of understand what you are likely to study, and you have a genuine interest in this, rather than you saying that, oh, in today's globalized world, economics is a very useful subject and everything is about economics and I want to study economics. So that's like using a lot of words without really having a lot to say about it. Right? Again, one of the things they want to see in your statement of purpose is what you've really done to understand the subject more. So here they want you to not exactly brag, but share your engagement with the subject, either through courses you took in school, and not just to say, oh, I studied business management in school, but to say that when I studied business management in school, the aspects that I found most interesting were about the structure of a company and how different partnership relationships work. Or that I found the subject of costing particularly interesting. And I used that to actually, when I set up a stall during Diwali, I used those inputs to price our products, right? So make it specific that I studied this and this is what I learned about it. Another thing you can mention to show your engagement with the subject is something like an online course you may have taken. So, for example, we have a few students who we are working with, who really made the effort to go and pick up 2 or 3 online courses from Yale and Harvard about the subject that they are studying, because they've not studied it in depth in school. And they, as they sat down to write the statement of purpose, they said, oh God, but I don't have anything specific to write. I don't even know what the subtopics within this subject might be. It could be something like psychology, it could be something like law. You may have not studied it in school. So taking an online course will both be something to talk about, and it gives you that meat, the specifics that you can use to talk about it. Then you can also mention a book you may have read, that, oh, I read Freakonomics, and I particularly found it interesting that economics can be used to explain personal choices that people make on the street or in a hotel or in very personal, specific circumstances. So talking about books, you could even mention a TED talk that you could have watched. But instead of just saying, and I watched this TED talk, and I read this book, and I took this course, for each of them, if you reflect on what did you pick up out of that particular thing, and at each step show your depth greater and greater, that's really what they're looking for in a statement of purpose. So as you can see, it's really a very different animal from your story type of essay. Okay, so I have some more questions here which I'll address to you, Niranjana. Okay, this one
Sure.
is it okay to choose a controversial topic such as atheism to write about in the essay, or is it too risky? I'm just going back to
Right. Yeah.
some.
Sorry, you just broke up for a moment.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. So religion and politics I put them in this category called risks because they are indeed risky. But they are not forbidden. They are risky but not forbidden is the way I'd say it. So you can write about religion and politics, but make sure that you don't do prescriptive writing in that. Like, don't tell people what they should think about these topics. So the focus must be on your personal journey. Right. So if you were raised, say, whatever, Catholic or Hindu, and you decided to become an atheist, you can totally write about what led you to become an atheist. But you should never ever convey by even the slightest hint that smart people would do what you did, or like this this is the conclusion to arrive at about religion, or like all religion is bad. So you never want to have any conclusions about the topic. All your conclusions are to do with yourself. And it's similarly for politics. So if you are writing about politics, don't take a stance about politics in general, but it has to be your personal lens. So I remember someone said, all politicians should be lined up and shot. And, you cannot, you might truly believe that, but you don't know who's reading it. So just from a very practical point of view, the person who's reading your essay might be deeply religious, or might be very invested in politics and be active in the local political scene. So it's totally okay to do it as your personal journey and your act of self-reflection. So maybe you question a lot of things about yourself while questioning your religious affiliation, like, how invested are you in traditions and, observing festivals and rituals? What does that say about you? Maybe it says that, you're not a crowd follower. You don't do things just because other people are doing it, but, and you don't mind standing out and being the center of attention, even negative attention, in order to actually carry out something you truly believe in. And that is a great essay to write. And it's almost like religion is the hook for revealing this about you. But religion cannot be the topic of the essay. This is what I think about religion. Religion has led to, lots of people doing good. Or religion is the source of all evil. You cannot write stuff like that.
Right. So I have a question here which is slightly different from the regular story type of essay. This is an architecture student asking that I want to do architecture. So what would when you're applying for architecture or design through the Common App to US colleges, you often have to write the Common App essay, right? Apart from your portfolio, but the essay is there. So how much does that essay matter? And does that need to be very architecture and design specific? I'm adding some stuff to her question, but I think that this is what she really wants to know.
So I don't have a specific answer for like each, major or architecture or things you're interested in. But the Common App is the same whether you are doing architecture or medicine, right? So it is, again, to reveal something personal about you. And if you're going to use design as a hook, that is totally fine, because you want to reinforce the fact that you were interested in architecture and you have all these, amazing design skills. But the focus is still on values, personality, character. So it doesn't really change depending on what your major is. It changes depending on what you want the college to know about you.
So, when we've had design students applying through the Common App, I've read some very interesting essays that they've written. Sometimes it is a sort of a reflection about the evolution of design, so they sort of take the prompts which talk about the topic that makes you lose track of time, or a background or interest that you'd like to share. And they go into the depth of how their thinking about design or architecture has evolved. So one of them spoke about Indian architecture and about how Indian architecture, how ancient architecture was very different, and then Mughal architecture was very different, and how India is sort of built on layers and layers of architectural thought, and how as an Indian he sort of brings this complexity to the whole idea of architecture. Or a design student talking about how he can't keep his hands still. When I'm talking to someone or I go for a meeting, I pick up something from their desk and start playing with it. Maybe the fidget spinner was made for me, because I'm just already doing things, and therefore I love playing with materials and I'm looking at product design. So, there are ways of using specific prompts to actually reflect on your engagement with design or architecture, and that can specifically be done.
Right. And I just want to mention one small thing is that, when you're going to write about, say, your involvement with architecture, make sure the piece doesn't sound journalistic in nature. Like the focus is not on conveying facts about architecture, but your relationship with these facts. So something I find a lot of students do is very kind of analytical. Sometimes you're writing about, say, you moved from, like India to Singapore. So I'm going to say these are the differences in the two systems that I've found. In Singapore, the education is like this, but in India, it's like this. That is not the way the essay is. It's a personal essay. So, by all means, talk about, architecture and the layering, but it's never telling the admissions officers, you're not like a mini Wikipedia, the focus is always you. I went here, I looked at this, I researched this. So just make sure that it's a personal essay.
So not the evolution of architecture, but the evolution of your thinking about architecture and how it impacts you. That's what you're saying.
Exactly, exactly.
Wonderful. Okay, I have a interesting question over here. This is from a grade 11 student. She's saying, how should we improve our writing skills? So, actually, I honestly, sometimes I find that this whole focus on essays is a little unfair on people who are not really writers by nature, who prefer to express themselves in other ways, or people who've not built their writing skills really. So how do now they're in grade 11 and they say, okay, then next year I've got all these essays to write. So is there something they can do in grade 11 to build writing skills?
Right. First, don't put so much pressure on yourself. The essay is not meant to be a showcase of how great your writing skills are. It can be very simple and very clear, and it doesn't have to have fancy words or sentences and grammatical, magic tricks. Nothing is required. They just want you to be really authentic and transparent about what kind of person you are. So don't set yourself saying, why don't I write like, I don't know, Salman Rushdie or something. That's not the point of the essay at all, and they don't expect it. And in fact, if you do turn in a highly polished essay, they will automatically think you had someone write it for you. So don't worry about the fact that it's not elegant and polished. The things you should actually focus on is clarity of your thought process. It has to be a logical flow. So, make sure your paragraphs kind of lead into each other, that you have one strong viewpoint and then write about it. That is one piece of advice I always say. Just make it simple, make it clear, make it a true reflection of yourself. If you're not the kind of person who would use fancy vocabulary in real life, you don't have to use it in the essay. The second thing I want to talk about is just, some tricks that you can do for like good, strong prose. So there are two components to writing, right? One is the thought process and the ideas that you put forth, and the second is the stylistic process, like how you express yourself. And for the stylistic process, there are a few like tips and tricks. And one of them is, just avoid all fillers in your essay. Like when we're talking, we always use these words like, I thought I'd say that, and, hey, I was just thinking about this, and it's just really not my thing. But when you're writing, you have 650 words, so you cannot use these kind of empty phrases in your conversation. So make sure that the writing is really tightly focused and eliminate everything that's unnecessary. After a good deal of reflection, I realized that what I really wanted to do was architecture. It's a really bad sentence. I want to do architecture is a good sentence. So you want to make sure that you don't kind of, fill it up with these redundant words. And the second tip I have for everyone who's trying to write like really tight writing is don't rely on adjectives and adverbs to do the work for you. Like, I ran fast, I smiled sadly, I worked hard. This is just really boring for that poor admissions officer to read. So instead of saying, I ran fast, you want to say something like, I dashed. Okay, so maybe something happened and, you felt really sad. So instead of saying, I walked sadly to my desk and sat down in my chair. You always sit in a chair. So you don't need that. You would just be like, I stumbled to my desk. Right? So these are just a couple of things you can do to tighten the prose. So you want to make sure that every word in your essay is working hard to convey something. If the word is not adding, just delete it, and then you'll find the essay just reads better. Don't use a lot of very's. I was very sad. Instead, you can say I was shattered, or I was very happy, I was ecstatic, is much better. So just make sure you don't overload with adjectives and adverbs, and that will automatically push you up like 2 grades in your writing. So that is a tip I do have for you, for all the students.
Okay, so I have 2 questions which are, I think, on a very important subject which a lot of students struggle with, which is about the connection of your essay with your major. So I'll read out the specific questions and then string them together for you. So one question is, some colleges ask for supplemental essays while some only use the Common App essay. For those who only use the main essay, should we tailor it to include major specific info as well? That's one question. The other question is, does the essay have to be about your major? So for example, if I'm a student writing about bioengineering or about biomedical sciences, now, not writing about, I'm applying for biomedical sciences. Now, how much should this essay reflect my scientific temperament? How much of that should relate to my major?
Right. So, the answer is it depends, like most answers. You can write about your major, but there should be a story attached to it. And something I always say is if your academic achievements related to your major are really strong and it's kind of self evident that you're invested in it, then use the essay to write about more like your characteristics and who you are. It doesn't have to be related to your major. So, for example, if you're applying for a math major and you won every single math Olympiad since you were in kindergarten, it's all there in the application itself. So then if you use your essay to say, hey, I'm so interested in math, it is actually a waste because it's evident from the resume and the details you're uploading in your application that you are interested in math. The one of the times you can write about your major is then when your grades in that particular subject are not great or you don't have great achievements, but the essay would show the depth of your commitment to the major in a way the rest of the application does not. So, you want to do medicine and you haven't got like super high grades in biology, but, there's some personal connection to medicine that you've had all your life. And maybe you miraculously revived a friend who was like sick or something. Where else would that information come? It would come in the essay. So in that case, you can write about your major in the essay. But if the big thing about the essay is don't replicate any info which is already there. Don't think, oh, they wouldn't have read it there, so let me put this in so that they don't forget how well I did in this particular thing. That is not something you should do.
Yeah, I wonder, if someone is applying for a science or a STEM-based course and their essay reads like a poet, that, I saw this dead bird and I was really struck by it and I thought about life and I thought about what happened with this person and death and life and so on. Is that confusing to an admissions officer that, hey, this kid is so philosophical and poetic in their writing, and there seems to be nothing STEM about their essay, and now they're applying on the other hand for computer science engineering. How does that work?
Actually, colleges love people who are good at art and philosophical, and whether you're like an engineer, it's actually a great combination. And there are actually some colleges specifically target people with this kind of interesting combination of interests. So like Brown University, for example, has something called the open curriculum, and the entire university is structured around the premise that people have different interests, and here's a place where you can kind of follow your passions for all your interests. So I had a student at Brown who was a pre-med student who was a writer, and she really, and her essay was entirely about her personal growth. She did not mention medicine. So that is totally fine. But again, the thing I want to say is your entire app should have a kind of cohesion to it. So if you're like super philosophical in your essay, it should balance out with the fact that you made 100 in math. So you want to show that those skills are in place and you also have this to offer. So it is not a substitute, but it is yet another appealing facet of your personality that you are a poet and you can write this, apart from, building robots in your sleep. So make sure that that side of things is covered in the app if you want to take this direction in your essay.
Yeah, and I guess the supplemental essays can be used to bolster your STEM profile a little bit more, while the common app they can be more whatever, poetic, philosophical, whatever. All right. So Niranjana, we're soon coming to the end of this webinar. If people want to speak up, you can speak up. You can just indicate, and Kritika will allow you to speak. Or if you have any specific questions, now is the time to put them up there. Meanwhile, Niranjana, any general tips you want to give to grade 12 students who are, dealing with all the stress and sitting down to staring at that blank screen and trying to write this essay?
Yes, I mean, don't overthink it. The essay is really a reflection of who you are. Don't write what you think the colleges want to hear about you. So you're all from India, and India is known for producing hardworking students who are really good in engineering and math and, all these topics. So don't kind of be like, how can I tell them I'm really good at this? They kind of know it already. So concentrate on showing how you are interesting as a person, and everyone is interesting. So often I talk to students and they tell me, amazing things about themselves, but they don't realize that they are amazing. So, I'm always like, wow, you have all this, and you wrote an essay about why you want to be an engineer, which is so flat, and you actually did some really interesting and wonderful things, and you have a very interesting personality. So don't overthink it. Just write about who you are as a person, and what makes you tick, why you're unique, and that is something you should just kind of go with the flow and go with what you feel, and then you can always edit it and shape it later. The other bit of information I do want to say is, once you write your essay, and if you're seeking help, be careful whom you get help from. If you show it to 10 people, you'll get 10 different opinions, and it can be really conflicting in your mind. So you really want to focus on who you want to show this essay to and what type of help you want, because the college essay is not like other pieces of writing. Okay, so if you're looking at an academic piece of writing, or like journalistic piece of writing, what you want from those is very different from what a college is looking for in a personal essay. So someone with really good intentions and wanting to help could actually not give you very relevant feedback about your essay, because a lot of people think the essay should be very respectful to the college. It's like a kind of, dear sir, and I look forward to working hard with you kind of. That's not the tone at all for a college essay. The college essay is always written like you're talking to a friend, like a friend you respect and is a little older to you, but it is not a formal essay. It is not about showing how smart you are or how brilliant you are. So I just want to say, be careful where you solicit feedback, because the feedback can be dangerous if people don't really understand the college essay process well.
Absolutely. And I wanted to share with everyone some of the packages that we worked out for students who are now working on their essays and want some essay specific help. And also feel free to reach out to us and customize. We are happy to customize for you anything that you need, and share with us that this is what I'm specifically looking for, and we'll tell you if we can help you with that and how we can help you with that. That's all there. So please feel free to reach out to us at info@inomi.in. And perhaps, Kritika, if you can just broadcast for all the attendees Poonam's number also, so that they can call up there if needed. Okay, so thank you guys. Thank you very much. And thanks for being there. We're at 8:30 sharp. I'm so happy we've spent our time very well. Great evening, and good luck to everyone with their essays.
Yes, good luck everyone, and it's morning here in California, so I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and think about your essays, and don't stress it too much. Everyone does this, and people before you have gone through it and done just fine. So right now it feels like the end of the world, but in 6 months you'll just laugh about this, and it'll just be like, oh yeah, I did the essays and that was fun. So don't worry too much.
All right, thank you, Niranjana. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great evening.